Hello everyone and welcome. Tonight, I want to take you on a journey far away from the noise of modern life. Imagine closing your eyes and stepping into a world without glowing screens, buzzing notifications, or the comfort of a hot shower waiting for you in the morning. Instead, the air smells of smoke, the walls are made of rough wood, and survival is not guaranteed by technology, but by your own hands and determination. We are heading back to Colonial America in the early 1700s, a time when everyday life was much more difficult than we can imagine today. Yet hidden in those struggles is a story of resilience, endurance, and the roots of what would later become the American spirit. Before we begin, take a deep breath, find a comfortable spot, and let us step together into a past where ordinary people faced extraordinary hardships just to live another day. Picture this. It is dawn in colonial America. The sun is barely rising, and you wake up not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the chill in the air. Your bed is nothing more than a rough sack, stuffed with straw. Each strand pokes at your skin through the thin cloth, leaving you sore and restless. The room is dim, because glass windows are a luxury far out of reach for most families. Instead, heavy wooden shutters keep out the cold, but also block the light. When you breathe, you see a cloud of mist form in front of your face. Yes, even indoors your breath turns to fog. In winter, you might even wake to find frost clinging to the inside of the walls, or a thin layer of ice covering the water bucket near your bed. There is no quick way to warm up. Fire is the heart of life here, but it takes effort. Someone has to rekindle the coals from last night, or strike sparks to start a flame again. Without fire, you have nothing, no warmth, no light, no hot food, and this is just the beginning of your day. Now pause for a moment and think about your own morning routine. You may reach for your phone, brush your teeth with clean running water, or prepare coffee in minutes. In colonial America, none of that exists. Running water is an unimaginable luxury. Electricity is centuries away. Even the idea of clean glass windows belongs mostly to the wealthy. Clothes are limited too. Most families own one or maybe two sets. You sleep in them, work in them, and repeat the next day. Laundry is not a weekly chore. It is a major undertaking that requires soap made from animal fat, buckets of water carried by hand, and hours of scrubbing and rinsing. Most people choose not to wash their clothes, often simply because it consumes too much of their precious time and energy. Comfort is not measured in softness or convenience. Comfort is measured in survival. If you are alive and relatively healthy, you are already luckier than many. Each day begins with the same pressing concerns. Do we have enough firewood to stay warm? Do we have food stored for the winter? Will our children stay healthy? Or will illness strike without warning? What we consider basic human needs, warmth, food, safety, clean water, are daily challenges for colonial families. Staying warm means long hours, chopping and hauling wood. Staying fed means endless work in the fields, planting, weeding, harvesting, and then carefully preserving every bite. Even water, something we take for granted, requires effort. Wells must be dug deep, ropes lowered, buckets pulled up, or streams visited again and again. Carrying water is backbreaking, repetitive work, and yet it is essential. But here's the fascinating part. Humans are adaptable. What shocks us as unimaginable hardship quickly becomes the rhythm of life for those born into it. Children grow up learning to carry water, to tend fires, to care for livestock, to spin thread or churn butter. By the time they are teenagers, They already possess skills most modern adults would struggle to learn. There is something profoundly humbling in realizing how capable ordinary people were in colonial times. They built their lives from the ground up, literally shaping wood, stone, cloth, and grain into the essentials of survival. Their bodies may have been sore, but their minds were sharp with the knowledge of how to endure. If we compare this world to our own, the differences are staggering. Today, warmth is controlled by a thermostat. In colonial America, warmth was a fire you had to tend constantly, and failure meant freezing. Today, food is stored in refrigerators or delivered to our doors. Back then, food preservation was a science of necessity, salting, smoking, drying, and hoping it would last until spring. Today, we can buy new clothes at the click of a button. In colonial times, clothing was precious, patched and mended until it nearly fell apart. Yet, while we enjoy more comfort, we may have lost some of the resilience and community spirit that these hardships produced. Imagine Sarah, a young mother in New England around 1725. She wakes before sunrise because the baby is stirring and the house is cold. She wraps herself in the same wool dress she wore yesterday, pulls the shutter aside, and sees her breath fog the air. Her first task is to get the fire going. The embers are faint, so she carefully blows on them, adds twigs, and finally feeds larger logs until the flame rises again. Only then can she heat a bit of water to prepare cornmeal mush for breakfast. Her husband has already stepped outside to chop wood. She can hear the steady thunk of his axe, echoing in the crisp morning. Her older children are carrying buckets to the well, struggling but determined. This is not a special day. It is every day. And yet, for Sarah, it is normal. When we talk about colonial America, it is easy to focus on politics, wars, or founding fathers. But the true foundation of early America was built in homes like Sarah's through hardship, persistence, and a quiet kind of bravery. The hardship of daily life was not just an obstacle, it was a teacher. It taught people patience, strength, endurance, and above all, reliance on family and community, because no one could do it all alone. Survival was a collective effort. So as we begin this journey through colonial America, remember this first truth: life was hard, relentlessly hard, but in that struggle lay the seeds of resilience and community spirit. People adapted, worked, and endured. They faced each day knowing survival was not guaranteed, and yet they carried on, and that is where our story begins. Because from those daily hardships would grow not only communities, but also the character of a nation still in its infancy. The fire has finally caught, and the room begins to glow faintly. Yet the morning is still sharp, and the cold lingers in your bones. You shift under the thin blanket and sit upright, feeling the stiffness in your back from the rough straw mattress. This is not the kind of sleep that leaves you refreshed. Instead, it is the kind of sleep where your body feels like it worked as hard resting as it did the day before. In colonial America, rest is not restoration. It is simply a pause before more labor begins. The small cabin you live in offers little comfort. Its walls are rough-hewn timber, not polished or painted. Cracks between the boards let in drafts that whistle during the night. On the floor, packed earth or rough planks hold the chill of the season. There is no glass window to let in soft morning light. Instead, there are wooden shutters. They keep out the worst of the rain and snow, but they also plunge the room into semi-darkness. When you open them, cold air rushes in, making you flinch even as the sunlight spills inside. You glance around at your family. Everyone sleeps in the same room. Privacy is rare, and space is limited. Children huddle together under thin blankets, their breaths rising in small puffs of white mist. Some mornings you wake to find frost clinging to their hair or eyebrows, evidence of just how close the elements press into your daily life. Even in the summer, nights can be cool enough to see your breath, because insulation as we know it does not exist. Now the day must begin. You slip into your clothes, except they are the same clothes you slept in, the same you wore yesterday, and likely the day before that. Most families do not own wardrobes filled with outfits. You might have one set of work clothes and a slightly better set reserved for Sunday church. Washing garments is such a monumental task that it is saved for only when absolutely necessary. Soap is handmade, often from animal fat and lye, and precious. Water is carried from wells or streams in heavy buckets. Heating that water for washing means burning valuable firewood. It is a process so consuming that most people simply avoid it. Instead, they brush off dirt, patch holes, and carry on. As you move about, the floor creaks. You can hear the sounds of life outside already beginning. The chop of an axe, the squeak of a well rope, the clatter of chickens in their coop. Neighbors are awake, starting their chores. There is no waiting until mid-morning to ease into the day. With the sun rising, work must rise too. Time itself is not governed by clocks in every home, but by daylight. When the sun sets, work ends. When it rises, it begins again. Your first task is to tend the fire. Last night's embers are faint, but not yet dead. You crouch low, blow gently, and feed them with twigs until they glow bright again. Then you add small logs, coaxing the fire to life. Without this, your family will go hungry. The fire must cook breakfast. It must heat water for drinking. It must warm the house enough to keep frost from forming again tomorrow. It is not simply a convenience, it is survival itself. Breakfast is not a lavish spread. There are no stacks of pancakes or plates of eggs and bacon waiting. Instead, you prepare cornmeal mush, perhaps with a little milk if the cow is producing. It is plain, filling, and reliable. Every bite represents effort to grow, to grind, to store. You stir the thick mixture in a heavy iron pot suspended over the flames. The heat is uneven, sparks fly, and burns are common. Yet this is routine. You do not think of it as dangerous. You think of it as necessary. Outside, your husband or father is chopping wood. The rhythmic thunk of the axe is steady, measured. Each swing is another piece of fuel for survival. Your older children are already working too, carrying water from the well or feeding animals. Even the youngest have chores, gathering eggs, picking up kindling, helping to sweep the dirt floor. Childhood is not a time of leisure, but of early responsibility. Everyone contributes. When you step outside, the morning air is crisp and biting. The smell is different from modern life. There is the sharp scent of wood smoke rising from chimneys across the settlement. Beneath it, there is something earthier, a mix of animals, damp soil, and human bodies, unwashed for days at a time. To modern noses it may be overwhelming, but to you it is ordinary. Your senses have adjusted. This is the smell of life, the smell of survival. Walking across the yard, you see the world as it truly is. Uneven, rough, handmade. Fences are built from whatever wood was available. Tools lean against walls, worn and patched. The thatched roof above your head is crafted from dried straw, carefully layered by skilled hands. Every single part of your environment is shaped by human labor. Nothing comes ready-made. This morning's scene, though harsh, also reveals the resilience of the people who live it. Waking sore, cold, and hungry does not break them. It shapes them. They know that each day will demand energy, creativity, and persistence. They cannot call a repairman when something breaks. They cannot order groceries when food runs out. They must solve every problem with their own skill or with the help of neighbors. In this way, hardship builds community. People depend on one another, not out of luxury, but out of necessity. Consider this: while modern mornings are filled with convenience, they often lack meaning. We wake, scroll through screens, sip coffee prepared in minutes, and rush through the day. In colonial America, every morning action was meaningful. Tending a fire meant the difference between warmth and freezing. Carrying water meant the difference between thirst and health. Preparing food meant the difference between hunger and energy for work. Every moment mattered. There is something both humbling and inspiring about that reality. It was exhausting, yes, but it also gave weight and purpose to daily life. People knew that survival depended on them showing up fully every single day. And as hard as it was, it created a deep sense of resilience, one that modern comforts may sometimes erode. So, as the colonial family begins their day, sore from their beds, cold in their homes, and hungry for breakfast, we see not just hardship, but also strength. Their morning reality is demanding and relentless, but it also carries lessons we can still value today. Gratitude for small comforts, awareness of the labor behind survival, and a reminder that human beings can adapt to almost anything when necessity requires it. And with that, the morning begins in earnest. Work is waiting, fields to tend, animals to feed, wood to chop, meals to cook, and endless tasks that fill every waking hour. This is life in colonial America, and it all starts the moment you open your eyes. The fire is alive now, glowing brighter as more logs are added. In colonial America, fire is not just warmth, it is the very heartbeat of the home. Every family begins the day by tending it, and every family relies on it to survive. Without fire, nothing else is possible. You cannot cook. You cannot boil water, you cannot chase away the cold, and you cannot see after sunset. Fire is both friend and danger, an unpredictable companion that must be respected and managed with care. In the center of your home stands the hearth, a large open fireplace made of stone or brick. It is wide enough to hold heavy iron pots with hooks or cranes that allow you to hang kettles over the flames. The smell of smoke lingers constantly, clinging to clothing, hair, and walls. The hearth is never truly clean, but it is always busy. Ashes must be swept, coals must be arranged, logs must be stacked nearby. Even when the fire is not blazing, someone must keep an eye on it, because letting it go out means hours of work to start it again. Cooking is a dangerous art. The iron pots used in colonial kitchens are far heavier than anything in a modern home. To lift one requires strength and balance, especially when it is filled with water or stew. Sparks leap unexpectedly, smoke billows into your eyes, and the heat is uneven. There are no knobs to adjust, no timers to keep track. You must learn by instinct by watching the flames, feeling the heat, and adjusting constantly. Burns are common. A hand slips, a spark lands on bare skin, a pot tips over. In a world without antibiotics or sterile hospitals, even a small burn can become deadly if infection sets in. Families know this, but there is no choice. Food must be cooked, water must be boiled, and fire is the only way to do it. Children grow up learning to be careful around the hearth, but accidents still happen. Water itself is a constant burden. It is never waiting in a tap. Every drop must be carried, often long distances, from wells or streams. Imagine hauling a wooden bucket filled with several gallons of water, the rope biting into your hand, the weight dragging at your arms. You must walk carefully so it does not slosh out, and then return again and again until you have enough. That water is poured into the pot, heated slowly, and then used for cooking or cleaning. Nothing is wasted because every ounce represents sweat and effort. Breakfast is simple but nourishing. Cornmeal mush is the most common meal, a thick porridge made from ground corn mixed with water or milk. Sometimes it is flavored with a little honey, molasses, or dried fruit, if those luxuries are available. Most days, though, it is plain. The goal is not flavor, but sustenance, fuel for the labor ahead. Bread is another staple, but baking bread is an all-day task. The oven must be heated with firewood until the stones glow, then cleaned of ash before loaves are slid inside with a long wooden paddle. Families often bake in large batches only once or twice a week, coordinating with neighbors to share ovens and conserve fuel. Fire is also the only source of light after the sun goes down. Candles are expensive and often saved for special occasions. For most families, the hearth provides the only glow in the darkness. Its flicker casts shadows on the walls, and families gather around it, not only for warmth, but for a sense of comfort. Stories are told by the fire. Chores like spinning or mending are done in its glow, and sometimes prayers are spoken as embers crackle. Yet fire remains unpredictable. A spark landing in the wrong place can set straw or wooden walls ablaze. Entire homes, even entire villages, have been lost to accidental fires. Families know this fear intimately, which is why children are taught strict caution near the hearth. Fire must be fed, but it must never be left alone. It is a balance between dependence and danger. Think for a moment about the meaning of fire in your own life. For us today, heat and light are nearly invisible luxuries, controlled by switches, dials, and invisible systems. We flip a switch, and a room brightens. We turn a knob, and water boils. The struggle to maintain warmth is hidden behind modern technology. But in colonial America, every spark was personal. Every meal was born from hours of effort. Every sip of clean water was earned. Consider a young boy, perhaps 8 years old, tasked with helping his mother cook over the fire. He holds the handle of a heavy pot as she stirs. His arms ache, but he does not complain. He knows this is how he learns. Later, he carries wood from outside, stacking it neatly by the hearth. His father reminds him sternly to keep it far enough from the flame so it does not catch, yet close enough that it can be fed in quickly when needed. These lessons are not abstract. They are survival skills. The rhythm of life beats to the rhythm of the fire. Each day begins with coaxing it to life and ends with banking it carefully so that embers remain for the morning. Families who lose their fire sometimes borrow coals from neighbors, carrying them home in covered pots to restart their own hearth. Community ties are strengthened not just by shared labor, but by shared fire. Beyond cooking and warmth, fire is central to countless other tasks. soap making, candle making, brewing, dyeing cloth all require heat. Blacksmiths depend on the forge, potters on their kilns, farmers on smokehouses to preserve meat. Fire powers industry, craft, and household life alike. Without it, nothing moves forward. And yet, despite all the danger, there is beauty in the fire as well. On a winter's night, when the wind howls outside and frost glitters on the shutters, the hearth glows warmly. Families huddle close, sharing stories, singing songs, or simply sitting together in silence. In those moments, fire is not just a tool of survival. It is a reminder of human ingenuity, of the ability to bend nature's most dangerous element into a source of comfort. This reliance on fire teaches a deeper lesson too. It shows us that survival is built not on convenience, but on constant effort and vigilance. In colonial America, a fire left unattended could mean disaster, but a fire carefully nurtured could mean life. The same principle applies to the people themselves. Left without care, hardship could overwhelm them, but with steady resilience and cooperation, they could thrive despite the odds. So, as the family finishes their morning meal, and the hearth continues to burn, the day is ready to unfold. Chores await outside, fields to work, animals to feed, wood to gather, but none of it would be possible without the flames glowing steadily behind them. Fire is not just survival. It is civilization itself, contained in a single hearth at the center of every home. The fire still glows, and now the day's true work begins. In colonial America, the struggle for food and water is constant. Every meal you eat is the product of weeks, months, even years of labor. There is no grocery store to run to when supplies run low. There is no refrigerator humming in the corner to keep leftovers fresh. What you eat today depends entirely on what you and your family manage to grow, raise, gather, and preserve. Water, the most basic necessity, is never taken for granted. There are no pipes hidden beneath the ground, no taps ready to pour. Instead, you or your children must walk to the well or stream with wooden buckets, lower them into the cold water, and haul them back up drop by drop. The buckets are heavy, sloshing with each step, and the rope cuts into your palms. In winter, the well might freeze, forcing you to break ice with an axe before lowering the bucket. In summer, drought may reduce the flow, making each trip uncertain. And water is not just for drinking, it is for cooking, cleaning, feeding animals, even making soap. Every drop must be planned for. Imagine this. You need water to cook your morning cornmeal mush. A child is sent with a yoke over their shoulders, 2 buckets dangling on either side. They stumble under the weight, but they keep walking, because without that water, the family will go hungry. This daily trek, repeated countless times, is as important as planting seeds or chopping wood. Water is life, and life requires effort. Food is an even larger struggle. Your survival depends on the cycles of planting and harvest. Corn, beans, and squash, the famous 3 sisters taught by native peoples, form the backbone of many diets. Together they grow in harmony. The corn provides tall stalks for beans to climb. The beans fix nitrogen in the soil, and the squash spreads across the ground, shading it to hold moisture. It is ingenious, but it is not effortless. Seeds must be planted at the right depth, spaced carefully, weeded constantly. A careless mistake or a stretch of bad weather could mean disaster. Once crops sprout, they require constant attention. Weeding, watering, scaring away birds or pests. Every hour of the day has a task. Children run through fields with rattles or shouts to keep crows away. Adults bend their backs in the sun, hands in the soil, sweat dripping, hoping the season will be kind. And when harvest comes, it is not a moment of relief, but of more work. Corn must be picked, dried, and stored. Wheat must be cut with sickles, bundled, threshed with flails to separate grain from stalks, and winnowed so the chaff blows away in the wind. Every step is manual. Every step is exhausting. Meat, too, is a challenge. Chickens provide eggs, but they must be fed and guarded from foxes. Cows give milk, but they need pasture, hay, and care. Pigs are raised for pork, but butchering is bloody, heavy work. Once meat is obtained, it cannot simply be stored in a freezer. It must be salted, smoked, or dried into jerky. Smokehouses are built to preserve cuts for months, filling the air with the heavy scent of burning wood and curing flesh. If the preservation fails, if meat spoils, you lose more than food. You lose months of labor. Apples are one of the few fruits that last through the winter, if stored carefully in a cool, dry place. Families dry slices in the sun, press others into cider, and guard barrels like treasure. A good apple harvest can mean survival until spring. A poor one can mean hunger. Bread is a cornerstone of many meals, but even bread is a luxury of time and resources. Grain must be ground into flour, often at a mill several miles away. The flour must be mixed, kneaded, and baked in a stone oven heated by hours of burning wood. Families often bake once or twice a week, producing loaves to last until the next time the oven is hot enough. Sometimes neighbors coordinate, sharing oven space to conserve wood. Baking is not a daily comfort, but a carefully scheduled production. Consider a typical day in autumn when harvest is at its peak. A family spends hours pulling ears of corn from stalks, piling them high in wagons, carrying them to barns. There, the tedious work of husking begins, sometimes turned into a community event where neighbors gather. They talk, laugh, and share food as they strip husks, because the task is lighter when done together. Inside the home, women and children slice apples for drying, stir pots of boiling brine for pickling cucumbers, or prepare jars for storing berries and syrup. The air is filled with the smells of vinegar, smoke, and fermenting cider. This is preservation season, when every hand must work without pause to prepare for the cold months ahead. And yet, even with all this labor, hunger is never far away. A poor harvest, a long winter, or a spoiled storehouse can spell disaster. Families live with the constant anxiety of whether the food they have will be enough. It is a shadow that follows them through every task, a reminder that survival is fragile. But there is pride, too. When a meal is placed on the table, a bowl of mush, a piece of bread, perhaps a slice of dried apple, it carries with it the weight of months of effort. Every bite tells a story of soil tilled, seeds planted, water hauled, fires tended, and countless hours of labor. Food is not simply sustenance. It is the visible proof of endurance. Now think of how different this is from our world today. We can walk into a store and buy food grown hundreds of miles away, preserved by refrigeration, packaged for convenience. We rarely think about the chain of labor that brought it to us. But in colonial America, you could not escape that chain because you were the chain. Your survival depended directly on the soil beneath your feet, the strength of your arms, and the cooperation of your neighbors. This reality shaped not only how people lived, but how they thought, gratitude for a full storehouse, anxiety over an empty one, celebration of a good harvest, mourning of a failed one. All these emotions were woven into the rhythm of life. The constant struggle for food and water taught patience, humility, and resilience. It reminded families every day that nature was both provider and threat, and that only through hard work could they hope to endure. As the day stretches on, meals are simple but precious. Mush in the morning, bread and cheese at midday, perhaps stew in the evening if vegetables and meat are available. Children carry baskets to the chicken coop to gather eggs, while mothers churn milk into butter or cheese to last through the week. Each task is repetitive, but each task matters. The family's very survival depends on them. By nightfall, the fire burns low again. The day's food has been eaten, the water buckets emptied, and tomorrow's work already waiting. Food and water in colonial America are never guaranteed, never effortless, never separate from the sweat of those who seek them. And as you lay down on your straw mattress once more, your back aching, you know that when dawn comes, the same struggle will begin again. As the sun climbs higher, you step outside, and reality greets you, not with fresh air, but with smells that cling stubbornly to the world around you. The truth is that colonial America was never clean by modern standards. Sanitation, the systems that quietly remove waste and protect health in our lives today, barely existed. Every family had to manage their own waste, and the results were often unpleasant, even dangerous. Behind most houses sits a simple outhouse, little more than a wooden shack with a hole dug into the ground. When that pit fills, someone must dig a new one and move the structure over it. On hot summer days, the stench is overwhelming. Flies swarm around, carrying disease from waste to food. Rain only makes matters worse, washing filth into streams and wells, contaminating the very water families depend on. Imagine lowering a bucket into a well and not knowing whether the water will refresh or sicken you. In cities, the problem grows even larger. Streets double as dumping grounds, with chamber pots emptied out of windows. When it rains, filthy streams run through alleys. When it is dry, the waste turns to dust, lifted into the air and breathed by everyone. And this is not only a problem for the poor. Even the wealthy, who may live in bigger homes, cannot escape the smells or the risks. Waste does not respect class. Disease spreads wherever people live close together without proper disposal. Outbreaks of dysentery, cholera, and other illnesses sweep through towns and villages, striking families with little warning. Children are especially vulnerable, and death is a familiar shadow. Bathing is rare. To fill a tub requires gallons of water, all carried by hand and heated over a fire. The cost in wood and effort is so great that most families cannot afford to do it often. Instead, people wash their hands and faces when they can, or use cloths to wipe down, but full baths are reserved for special occasions. Clothes are worn until they are visibly dirty, then cleaned only when absolutely necessary. Soap is costly and made in small batches from animal fat and lye, a harsh substance that burns skin if not prepared carefully. What does this mean for daily life? It means that smells become part of the environment. Wood smoke, sweat, animals, and human waste all blend together. For a visitor from the modern world, the odor would be overwhelming, but for those who live in it, the nose adapts. What is constant fades into the background. Just as we no longer notice the hum of traffic or the faint smell of gasoline in cities, colonial families eventually stop noticing the scent of their own world. People do what they can To cope, herbs are burned in homes to mask odors, their fragrant smoke filling the air with sage or lavender. Bundles of dried plants hang near doors and windows, believed to ward off illness as well as bad smells. Some families change their outer garments more often than they wash their bodies, hoping clean clothes will provide at least the impression of freshness. Floors are swept daily, waste is thrown farther from the house, and chores like mucking stalls or clearing trash are part of survival. Still, these efforts cannot erase the dangers. Contaminated water remains one of the deadliest threats. Without knowledge of germs, families do not understand why illness spreads, only that it does. A child may drink from a bucket that seems clean and fall ill within days. An entire settlement may face sickness after a storm washes waste into the river. Disease becomes a fact of life, accepted with resignation, prayed over in churches, and endured with stoic faith. Doctors are rare, and even when available, their treatments are primitive. Folk remedies often provide more comfort. Willow bark tea eases pain. Honey soothes sore throats. Vinegar washes wounds. Sometimes these remedies work, though people do not know why. Often they fail. Survival depends less on medicine and more on luck and resilience. Families learn to live with constant risk, cherishing health when they have it, because they know it may not last. Imagine a summer day in a crowded colonial town. The air is heavy with heat, and the narrow streets reek of waste. Children run barefoot, their feet splashing through puddles that you would not dare to touch. A woman empties a chamber pot from an upstairs window, its contents joining the mess below. A cart passes, wheels splattering mud, and worse onto passers-by. Shops and houses alike share this same environment. No one is spared. This is the reality of daily sanitation, and yet people endure. They adapt not only physically, but mentally. Stronger immune systems develop over time because exposure is constant. Those who survive childhood illnesses often grow into adults with bodies hardened by experience. The price of this resilience, however, is high. Countless lives lost before they had the chance to grow, families left grieving, communities reshaped by absence. We often imagine the past through romantic images, charming villages, candlelit homes, families gathered around fires. But behind those images lies the harsher truth, the constant battle against filth, the smell of outhouses, the fear of contaminated water, the knowledge that illness might arrive with no warning. Survival is not just about farming or building. It is also about navigating the invisible dangers of poor sanitation every single day. Consider how different this is from our own lives. Today, waste disappears. With the flush of a toilet, water flows clean and safe from taps. Entire systems of pipes, treatment plants, and regulations protect us without us even noticing. We live in a world where we rarely question whether the water we drink will harm us. But in colonial America, that question haunted every household. And so, the lesson is this: hardship shapes perspective. Colonial families may not have known the science behind disease, but they knew the fragility of life. They accepted discomfort as normal and found ways to live around it. Their resilience grew not because they chose it, but because they had no other choice. As you step back into the cabin at the end of the day, you bring with you the smells of the outside world. The fire flickers, herbs hang near the window, and the family gathers once more. They do not complain of odors or dirt. They are grateful for another day of survival, another meal, another chance to face tomorrow. Cleanliness as we know it may be centuries away, but endurance, resourcefulness, and community already shine through the grime. The air in your home is heavy, with smoke from the hearth and the faint scent of herbs hung to dry. In colonial America, health is never guaranteed. Every day, people live under the shadow of illness and injury. A small cut from a kitchen knife, a burn from the hearth, or a cough that lingers too long, these things, so minor to us today, can become life-threatening here. Without hospitals, antibiotics, or vaccines, survival depends on the body's own strength and the wisdom passed down from generations. When someone falls ill, there is rarely a trained doctor nearby. Most communities rely on folk healers, midwives, or family members who know remedies from experience. A mother may gather willow bark to brew into tea for her child's fever, not knowing that the bark contains a compound similar to modern aspirin. A father may mix honey with whiskey to soothe a harsh cough, hoping the sweetness and warmth will ease his child's breathing. Bread soaked in milk may be pressed into a wound as a poultice, thought to draw out infection. Some remedies work, others do nothing, or even make matters worse. But families cling to them because they are the only hope available. Herbs are a kind of home pharmacy. Sage, mint, chamomile, and lavender are grown in small gardens, dried, and stored carefully. Garlic is believed to ward off illness, vinegar used to cleanse wounds, and tobacco smoke sometimes blown into ears to treat earaches. Superstition blends with practical knowledge, because no one truly understands the invisible world of germs. Illness is often explained as punishment from God, or imbalance in the body's humors, old European ideas carried across the ocean. Childhood is the most fragile time. Diseases like smallpox, measles, or dysentery spread quickly, and many children do not survive past their early years. Families know loss intimately. A crib that once held a baby may stand empty within months. Parents grieve, but they continue on because life demands it. Every surviving child is both a blessing and a reminder of the risks. Accidents are just as dangerous as disease. Burns from the hearth, injuries from farm tools, broken bones from falls all can turn deadly. Without sterile bandages or clean instruments, infection sets in easily. Teeth are another constant source of misery. Cavities grow painful, but there are no dentists as we know them today. A toothache may be treated with cloves pressed against the gum or by simply pulling the tooth with crude metal pliers. George Washington himself, decades later, would suffer through terrible dental problems, wearing dentures made from ivory, metal, and even human teeth. The pain was constant, but there was no better option. Yet, despite the suffering, resilience grows. Those who survive illness develop strong immune systems, hardened by constant exposure. Children who make it past the early years often become tough adults, able to withstand cold, hunger, and infection with a strength that surprises us today. Communities, too, learn resilience. When one family is struck by illness, neighbors bring food, gather firewood, or help care for children. Hardship creates bonds, because survival is rarely possible alone. Imagine a colonial household in winter. The father has a deep cough, each breath rattling his chest. The mother brews an herbal tea, stirring willow bark and honey into steaming water, urging him to drink. She sits by the fire through the night, listening anxiously. The children sleep fitfully nearby, wrapped in thin blankets, their faces lit by the glow of the fire. Outside, Snow piles against the door. There is no doctor to call, no pharmacy to visit. All they can do is wait, pray, and trust in remedies passed down through generations. Sometimes the remedies surprise us with their effectiveness. Honey truly does kill bacteria. Willow bark really does ease pain. Certain herbs reduce fever, soothe stomachs, or calm the nerves. These discoveries were not made in laboratories, but in kitchens and gardens, through centuries of trial and error. But for every remedy that worked, there were others that did not. People drank tonics made from mercury or lead, not knowing the poisons they swallowed. They rubbed strange concoctions into wounds, hoping for healing, only to worsen the injury. Colonial medicine was a blend of wisdom and guesswork, courage and desperation. And yet, faith gave people strength as much as herbs did. Many believed sickness was part of God's plan, a trial to be endured. Prayer, fasting, and church services were as important as any remedy. Ministers preached about the fleeting nature of life, urging families to accept suffering with humility. In a world where death was always near, faith offered comfort, if not cure. This closeness to illness shaped daily life. Families expected hardship and built resilience into their routines. They boiled water when they could, swept their floors, burned herbs to purify the air. Mothers taught daughters which plants to gather. Fathers taught sons how to tend animals without injury. Every lesson was a form of survival training. Think of how different this is from our own time. A fever today sends us to the pharmacy for pills. A broken bone is set in a hospital with sterile tools. A cough can be checked with antibiotics or inhalers. We rarely fear that a scratch on the hand will end a life. But in colonial America, fear was constant, and from that fear grew resilience, not the kind chosen willingly, but the kind forced upon people who had no other choice. There is a powerful lesson in this. Hardship is not just suffering, it is also a teacher. It teaches patience when remedies fail, courage when illness strikes, and gratitude when health returns. Colonial families lived each day with an awareness of mortality that gave their lives urgency and depth. They may not have had modern science, but they had strength, endurance, and the ability to find meaning even in struggle. As the day ends and the family gathers by the fire, the father's cough has eased slightly. The children whisper prayers before sleep. The mother tidies her herbs, ready for whatever tomorrow brings. They do not know if sickness will pass or worsen, but they have done all they can. In this world, health is fragile, but hope is strong. As another day in colonial America unfolds, the differences between families become more visible. Life here is never easy, but it is not the same for everyone. Social class shapes daily reality. Whether you are a poor farmer scratching at rocky soil, a middling craftsman in town, or one of the wealthy few who live in large houses with imported luxuries, your life is defined by what you own, what you can trade, and how much labor you must endure with your own hands. At the lowest rung are the poor farmers and laborers. Their homes are simple log cabins with dirt floors, straw beds, and roofs patched with whatever material is available. They own little land, sometimes only a small plot, barely enough to feed their families. Every season brings anxiety. If the crop fails, there will be hunger. These families rise at dawn, children working beside parents, all hands needed to plant, weed, harvest, and preserve. Clothing is rough, patched many times, sometimes handed down from older children to younger until it falls apart. A family might own one iron pot, one axe, and a few basic tools. Each object is precious. For them, survival is a daily negotiation with nature, luck, and endurance. The middling sort, craftsmen, tradesmen, small merchants, and skilled farmers, live a different life. Their houses are sturdier, often with wooden floors and perhaps even glass panes in the windows, if they can afford them. Furniture is plain but solid, crafted either by their own hands or by neighbors in exchange for goods. These families can usually produce enough food not only to survive but to trade. A blacksmith might live above his shop, the sound of hammer and anvil echoing throughout the day. A weaver's house is filled with the rhythmic clack of a loom. These households have more security, though not luxury. They wear sturdy clothes, often well-fitted and practical, and eat simple meals that fill the stomach without extravagance. Their lives are still shaped by labor, but their work sometimes brings respect and stability within the community. Then there are the wealthy landowners, merchants, and members of the colonial gentry. Their homes stand apart, larger and finer than others. A wealthy family might live in a brick house with several rooms, fireplaces in each, and actual glass windows letting in soft light. Their beds have feather mattresses, their tables are laid with imported china, and their cups hold tea from China or coffee from the Caribbean. Wigs, powdered and styled, adorn the heads of gentlemen, while ladies wear gowns of silk or fine linen dyed in rich colors. Servants, indentured laborers, and in some regions enslaved people work the land or tend the household, sparing the wealthy from the exhausting chores of daily survival. Yet even the wealthy are not insulated from hardship. Their homes may be larger, but they are still cold in winter and sweltering in summer. They may eat imported delicacies, but they also rely on fire for cooking and candles for light. A fever or accident can strike them just as easily as it does the poor, and no amount of wealth can buy modern medicine. They live more comfortably, but they do not escape the dangers of their age. The contrast between classes is sharpest in the cities. Walk through a colonial town, and you will see it clearly. In one street, merchants' houses display imported fabrics and goods from across the Atlantic. Men in tailored coats stroll with canes. Women in bright dresses whisper behind fans. Just blocks away, laborers live in crowded wooden buildings, the smell of waste heavy in the air, their children running barefoot through muddy alleys. Wealth and poverty exist side by side, separated not by miles but by walls. And yet, despite these differences, some experiences are shared. All depend on fire for warmth and food. All worry about disease and accidents. All live in communities where survival depends on cooperation, whether it is neighbors helping husk corn or families borrowing coals to restart their hearth. In church, distinctions blur. Rich and poor alike sit through long sermons on sin and salvation, their breath misting in the cold air of unheated buildings. Death, too, ignores wealth. The graveyard holds both gentry and laborers, their names carved into stone or wood, their lives ended by the same diseases, accidents, and hardships. Still, class shapes opportunity. A poor farmer's son may inherit little land and struggle his whole life. A craftsman's child might learn a trade, earning enough to secure comfort but rarely wealth. A wealthy child, however, inherits land, connections, and the expectation of leadership. Education follows these lines as well. Wealthy boys may study Latin and philosophy, preparing for university in England. Middling children may learn to read, write, and count if schools exist nearby. Poor children often learn only practical skills, their education, the daily labor of survival, This sense of status is visible even in food. At a poor family's table, mush, bread, and perhaps salted pork form the bulk of meals. At a middling home, there might be cheese, vegetables, or a bit of beer with supper. At a wealthy table, imported tea, sugar, fine meats, and elaborate dishes show both wealth and connection to the wider world. These meals are more than nourishment. They are symbols of class. Yet class is not only about possessions, it is about influence. The wealthy sit on local councils, manage trade, and shape the laws that govern everyone. The middling sort may have a voice in town meetings, respected for their skills and contributions. The poor rarely speak in such spaces, their concerns overlooked, their lives dictated by the decisions of others. And still, in the fields, workshops, and homes, all classes labor. Survival spares no one. Consider, for example, 3 families on the same road. One is a poor farmer's family, their house drafty, their meals meager, their clothing worn thin. Another is a carpenter's family, living above the workshop, surrounded by the smell of sawdust, their life steady but modest. The third is a merchant's family, their home filled with fine furniture, their children dressed in bright coats, sipping tea from porcelain cups. They all wake to the same dawn, all rely on the same fire, all face the same risks of illness or loss. But their daily experiences, how much labor they endure, how much food they can count on, how much hope they hold for their children, are worlds apart. This layering of society shaped colonial life deeply. It created tensions, opportunities, and limits, but it also forged resilience across all classes. The poor learned endurance, the middling learned craft and resourcefulness, and the wealthy learned leadership and responsibility, even if imperfectly. Together these classes formed the fabric of a society still in its infancy, one where hardship was universal but not equal. As night falls across the colony, the distinctions remain visible. In a grand house, candles flicker on polished tables as wealthy families sip imported tea. In a craftsman's home, a single candle lights a room where weaving or mending continues. In a poor cabin, only the glow of the hearth gives light, shadows flickering across weary faces. 3 classes, 3 lives, all bound by the same land, the same dangers, and the same uncertain future. Morning has barely ended, but already the rhythm of labor fills the air. In colonial America, work is not a matter of choice. It is the heartbeat of life. Every person in the household, from the smallest child to the eldest grandparent, plays a role. Survival depends on hands that never rest, on backs that bend without complaint, and on a community that understands that no one can endure alone. Children are introduced to work almost as soon as they can walk. A boy of 5 may be sent to carry water or gather kindling for the hearth. A girl of the same age might learn to spin wool, her small fingers clumsy at first but quick to adapt. By the time they are 8 or 9, children already have daily chores, feeding chickens, weeding gardens, collecting eggs, or helping to mind younger siblings. There is no long stretch of childhood as we know it today. Childhood here is a training ground for adulthood, a gradual initiation into the endless labor that defines every day. For boys, work often mirrors their father's trade. If the father is a farmer, the son learns to guide a plow, to plant seeds in neat rows, to mend fences. If the father is a blacksmith, the boy grows used to the clang of iron, the glow of the forge, the careful hammer strokes that shape tools and horseshoes. If the father is a carpenter, the boy spends his days with saw and plane, shaping rough timber into sturdy beams. Each skill is learned by doing, mistakes corrected, not with patience alone, but with the reminder that mistakes can cost precious resources. For girls, the rhythm of labor is tied to the home. From their mothers they learn to cook over the hearth, to churn butter from cream, to weave and sew, to patch clothing until it nearly falls apart. They learn the art of spinning, their hands moving with the wheel as they twist wool or flax into thread. They help preserve food, slicing apples to dry, stirring vats of brine for pickling vegetables, kneading dough for bread. They are taught not only how to care for a household, but how to sustain it. Each skill is a lifeline, ensuring that when they grow older, they will be capable of running households of their own. The work is constant, but it is not joyless. In fact, it often creates bonds that are stronger than words. Families work side by side in fields, sharing both hardship and pride. Neighbors join together for larger tasks, transforming drudgery into social events. Corn husking bees, for example, are common in autumn. Families gather in a barn, sitting in circles with towering piles of corn. Hands move quickly, stripping husks, while voices rise in laughter, songs, and stories. A red ear of corn might mean a kiss for a chosen sweetheart, a small spark of romance in the midst of toil. Work becomes celebration, labor becomes community. Barn raisings are another example. When a new family settles or an old barn collapses, neighbors arrive to help rebuild. Men lift heavy beams into place. Women prepare food for the crowd. Children run about carrying tools or water. By the end of the day, a new structure stands tall, the result of many hands working in unity. These events are more than practical. They are the glue that holds the community together. No one family can survive alone, but together they can accomplish almost anything. Even in daily routines, community is visible. Women gather to spin wool or quilt blankets, their voices blending as they share news, gossip, and advice. Men work side by side in fields or workshops, trading tools and lending skill. When sickness strikes one household, others step in with food, firewood, or childcare. When death comes, neighbors dig graves and share in mourning. Life is woven from countless acts of shared labor and shared responsibility. Time itself bends to the rhythm of work. There are no 8-hour shifts, no weekends set aside for rest. The day begins with the sun and ends when the light fades. In summer, this can mean 14 or more hours of labor. In winter, fewer hours outdoors, but no less work indoors, mending, spinning, preserving food, tending fires. Evenings are not a time for leisure so much as a time for quieter work, patching clothes, repairing tools, teaching children to read by the dim glow of the fire. Despite the unending cycle, there is pride in this labor. To contribute to one's family, to see the harvest safely stored, to know that your hands have built, sewn, cooked, or crafted something essential. This creates a sense of dignity. A boy beams when his father praises the straight row of crops he planted. A girl feels pride when her mother praises the even thread she spun. Work is not only survival, it is identity. Of course, the weight of labor is heavy. Backs ache, hands blister, exhaustion seeps into every limb. But the people of colonial America rarely complain in the way we might expect. To them, work is life. There is no expectation of rest beyond sleep, no belief that ease is a right. In this, they differ greatly from us. Where we may see monotony and burden, they see necessity and purpose. This does not mean there is no joy. Laughter rings out even in the fields. Children play games with sticks or stones between chores. Songs are sung while spinning wheels turn, or while threshing grain in barns. Storytelling fills long evenings, a way to lighten the heart while hands remain busy. Even the most tedious tasks are softened by company. A woman may grumble about endless laundry, but as she scrubs alongside her neighbor at the stream, their conversation turns the chore into companionship. The deeper truth is that community transforms survival into life. Alone, the tasks are crushing. Together, they are bearable. Neighbors become extended family, and every success, a barn raised, a harvest gathered, a child healed, belongs not just to one household but to all. This sense of shared labor and shared destiny gives colonial communities resilience against hunger, disease, and despair. Think for a moment about your own world. We live in an age where independence is prized, where many of us barely know our neighbors. Yet in colonial America, independence was an illusion. True survival came only through interdependence. Perhaps this is one of the greatest lessons the past offers us, that human beings are not meant to endure hardship alone, but to share it, lighten it, and overcome it together. As the sun sets on another day, the sounds of labor quiet. The axes rest, the spinning wheels slow. The fields fall silent. Families gather by the fire. Neighbors return home from shared tasks. Children finally sleep. The day has been long, but it has been filled with work that matters, work that binds families and communities together. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, and once more, it will be labor and community and resilience that carry them through. The day's work has ended, the fire burns low, and families settle into the dim light of evening. But even as bodies rest, minds turn to something deeper: faith. In colonial America, religion is not a small part of life. It is the lens through which people see the world, the anchor that steadies them against loss, and the language they use to explain hardship. When illness comes, when crops fail, when death steals away a child, faith provides meaning, even if it does not provide answers. On Sundays, communities gather at church, often the largest building in town. It may be plain, with wooden benches and no heat, or more ornate if the settlement is wealthy, but either way it dominates the social and spiritual life of the colony. Families travel miles to attend, wrapped in cloaks against the cold, children trailing behind their parents. Inside, the congregation sits for hours as ministers deliver sermons that thunder about sin, salvation, and the fragile line between life and eternity. The pews are hard, the air unheated, but no one leaves early. To skip church is not only to risk your soul, but also to risk the disapproval of neighbors in a world where community reputation matters. Faith shapes daily routines too. Morning prayers before chores, grace before meals, evening devotions by the hearth, all are woven into the fabric of family life. A sick child prompts not just herbal remedies, but also whispered prayers. A poor harvest is endured with fasting and petitions for divine mercy. Even laughter and celebration are often framed as blessings from God, to be enjoyed with gratitude rather than taken for granted. Fatalism runs deep. People accept that suffering is part of life, part of God's plan, part of the fallen world they believe they inhabit. When a child dies, as so many do, parents grieve, but also console themselves that the child is in heaven. When disease strikes, Families remind themselves that life and death are in God's hands. This belief does not erase pain, but it allows them to endure with a strength that seems almost unthinkable today. Imagine a winter service in New England. Snow covers the ground, and families arrive shivering, stamping their boots before entering the meeting house. Inside, the air is icy, breath rising in clouds. As the minister begins, his voice carries through the wooden room, warning of sin, urging repentance, promising salvation. Children fidget on benches. Women pull shawls tighter. Men sit with solemn faces. For 2 or 3 hours they listen, their minds fixed not on the discomfort but on the eternal truths being preached. When the service ends, they return home hungry and cold, but also reminded of their place in the world, small, fragile, and yet meaningful in the eyes of God. Religion also provides structure to communities. Laws often reflect religious beliefs, dictating behavior in public and private life. In Puritan New England, for example, laws regulate everything from church attendance to the observance of the Sabbath. Work on Sunday is forbidden. Markets close, tools are laid aside, and even play is discouraged. The day belongs entirely to God. In other colonies, religious diversity is greater, with Quakers, Anglicans, Catholics, and others practicing their faiths. But even in those places, religion remains central to identity and daily life. Faith is also a source of comfort in the face of injustice. Many colonists live with fear of losing children, fear of raids, fear of hunger. They cannot control nature or disease, but they can turn to God for solace. Ministers remind them that trials build character, that suffering refines the soul, that endurance leads to eternal reward. These teachings do not erase the grief of bearing a child or watching crops rot, but they help families continue, reminding them that their struggles have meaning beyond what they can see. And yet, religion is not only about solemnity, it is also about joy. Hymns sung in harmony, weddings celebrated with prayers and feasts, baptisms marking new life. These moments remind families that faith encompasses both sorrow and celebration. Community gatherings after services allow neighbors to exchange news, share food, and strengthen ties. Even within strict traditions, there is warmth in the shared belief that no one faces hardship alone. Consider a colonial mother sitting by the fire after a long day. Her child is sick, coughing weakly in the corner. She has brewed an herbal tea, laid a damp cloth on the child's forehead, and whispered prayers over and over. She knows the outcome is uncertain, but she also believes that God hears her. She may not understand why illness comes, but she trusts that endurance has a purpose. Her strength lies not only in her remedies, but in her faith. This deep religiosity shapes how colonists think about death. Unlike us, who often see death as an interruption, they see it as a constant companion. Graveyards are not hidden away, but placed in the center of towns, reminders that life is short and fragile. Tombstones bear inscriptions not only of names, but of faith. Here lies, awaiting the resurrection. Funerals are solemn, but also hopeful, communities gathering to mourn and to remind themselves that death is not the end. We might wonder how people endured so much hardship without despair. The answer lies in this blend of faith and fatalism. To them, life was not promised to be easy. Hardship was expected, and endurance was a sign of strength. Faith gave them the courage to face tomorrow, even when today was filled with grief. And in their communities they found reinforcement. As neighbors echoed the same beliefs and shared the same rituals, In modern life, religion may not hold the same universal place, but the lesson remains powerful. Faith, in any form, provides meaning in hardship, whether through religion, philosophy, or a personal sense of purpose. Finding meaning is what allows people to endure. Colonial America reminds us that while comfort can ease suffering, belief is what makes it bearable. As night deepens and families settle in, prayers are whispered once more. Gratitude for another day, petitions for health and protection, hope for tomorrow. The fire glows, shadows flicker, and children drift to sleep hearing their parents' voices lifted in devotion. In a world of uncertainty, this ritual offers a steady anchor, and when morning comes, no matter what challenges await, they will rise again, their faith carrying them through another day. Even in a world filled with hardship, illness, and endless labor, people in colonial America did not live only in sorrow. Joy found its way into their days, woven into simple acts, creative work, and the laughter of children. Survival demanded effort, yes, but alongside the struggle were moments of beauty and play that gave life warmth and color. These moments, though small, were essential. They reminded families that existence was not only about endurance, but also about celebration. Craftsmanship filled homes with quiet creativity. Women spun wool at the wheel, their hands guiding fibers into thread. The hum of the wheel and the rhythm of their fingers created a kind of music, steady and soothing. While they worked, they sang ballads or told stories to children gathered nearby. The thread became cloth, the cloth became clothing or blankets, and in the process, art was born. Quilts in particular became not just practical coverings, but expressions of imagination. Patterns stitched into fabric told stories of family, of community, of hopes and fears. Each square carried meaning, passed down through generations. Men, too, expressed creativity in their trades. A carpenter shaping wood might carve a decorative edge into a chair, transforming it from simple necessity to something beautiful. A blacksmith forging a tool might etch a small design into the iron. Even when the purpose was purely practical, the human impulse to beautify remained strong. Homes, though humble, were decorated with hand-woven rugs, painted dishes, or carved wooden toys. These touches of artistry turned survival into life worth cherishing. Children, though burdened with chores, also found time for play. Their toys were simple sticks, stones, bits of string, but their imaginations transformed them into wonders. A hoop rolled with a stick became a race down a dirt path, a whirligig made from string, and a button spun with buzzing delight. Dolls carved from wood or stitched from scraps of cloth became companions in endless games of pretend. Laughter rang out as boys carved whistles from willow branches or chased each other across fields. Even the smallest object could become a source of joy in the hands of a child with imagination. Games were not only for children. Adults, too, enjoyed moments of play, especially during community gatherings. After long hours of husking corn or quilting, music often filled the air. Someone brought out a fiddle, another clapped hands in rhythm, and soon neighbors were dancing. These dances were not elaborate, but they lifted spirits. Voices rose in song, feet stomped on wooden floors, and for a few hours, exhaustion gave way to celebration. Music carried across the night, echoing in barns and fields, reminding everyone that even in a world of hardship, joy was possible. Food, when plentiful, was another source of celebration. Harvest festivals were filled with roasted meats, baked breads, and cider pressed fresh from apples. Families gathered around long tables, sharing not only food, but laughter and stories. Even daily meals, though simple, carried pleasure. The first taste of bread fresh from the oven, the sweetness of honey drizzled on porridge, the crisp bite of a newly picked apple. These were small luxuries that brightened weary days. In a world where hunger was common, every good meal was a reason to give thanks and rejoice. Storytelling was one of the greatest joys of all. By the hearth at night, families shared tales, biblical stories, folk legends, and personal memories. Children listened wide-eyed as parents told of spirits in the woods, of heroes and adventures, of lessons learned from the past. These stories taught values, passed down history, and gave children dreams beyond their daily chores. They also bonded families, creating a sense of belonging. In laughter at a funny tale, or silence at a solemn one, families found joy in words as much as in deeds. Holidays brought even more celebration. Christmas, though not as commercial as it is today, was a time of feasts, games, and gatherings. Families decorated with evergreen branches, baked special treats, and exchanged small gifts made by hand. In some colonies, Thanksgiving marked the end of harvest with prayers and feasting. Weddings, too, were community events filled with music, food, and dancing. These occasions reminded everyone that life was not only about hardship, but also about milestones and joy shared together. Even work sometimes became play. A quilting bee, for example, was a chance for women to gather, gossip, and laugh while stitching fabric. A corn-husking party turned tedious labor into festivity, complete with music, food, and friendly competitions. In these moments, work lost its heaviness, replaced by the energy of community. The line between duty and delight blurred, showing that even in survival tasks, joy could be found if shared. The natural world, too, offered beauty that brought joy. A sunrise over fields, the smell of blooming herbs, the sound of birdsong in the woods. These were everyday miracles that lifted spirits. Children chased fireflies at dusk, marveling at their glow. Families sat outside in the cool of summer evenings, watching stars fill the sky. Without artificial lights to dim them, the heavens stretched endlessly above, a breathtaking reminder of something larger than themselves. Consider a young girl sitting with her mother at the spinning wheel. As the wheel hums, her mother sings softly, a tune passed down from her grandmother. The girl hums along, her small hands learning to guide the wool. Beside them, her brothers play with wooden hoops, laughing as they chase them across the yard. The father, returning from the fields, carves a whistle from a branch and hands it to the youngest child, who blows into it with delight. For a brief moment, the worries of survival fade, replaced by music, laughter, and the glow of family togetherness. This is joy in its purest form. In modern life, joy often comes from possessions, entertainment, or grand experiences. In colonial America, joy came from small, ordinary moments of creativity, connection, and gratitude. A quilt stitched with love, a story told by firelight, a song played on a fiddle, a loaf of fresh bread. All these things carried meaning far beyond their simplicity. They reminded families that life, though harsh, was also full of beauty. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson. Joy does not require abundance. It does not need perfection. It can grow in the cracks of hardship, shining brighter because of the darkness around it. For colonial families, joy was not an escape from struggle. It was a companion that made struggle bearable. As the fire burns low and families prepare for sleep, children clutch their toys, parents share a quiet laugh, and neighbors return home after an evening of music. The house is small, the bed is rough. Tomorrow will bring endless work again. But tonight there is joy, simple, humble, enduring, and in that joy lies the strength to rise again when the sun returns. The laughter from the quilting bee fades, the fiddle's last notes settle into silence, and yet, beneath the surface of colonial America, another sound grows louder, a restless murmur of discontent. For decades, people have endured hardship with quiet strength, accepting that life is difficult and survival requires grit. But by the mid-1700s, new pressures arrive, not from the soil or the weather, but from across the ocean. These pressures will begin to change the very identity of the colonies, planting seeds that will one day grow into revolution. At first, the colonies were seen by Britain as distant outposts, useful for raw materials like timber, tobacco, and furs. Ships carried these goods across the Atlantic, and in return colonists received manufactured items, cloth, porcelain, tools, even tea. This arrangement, though sometimes unequal, kept trade flowing, but Britain's wars in Europe and America left the empire in debt, and soon the colonists were asked to pay a price they had never agreed to bear. The Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, new taxes imposed on molasses, paper, tea, and countless other items were introduced one after another. To the Crown, these were simple revenue measures. To the colonists, they felt like chains. They were paying taxes to a government thousands of miles away, a government in which they had no voice. The phrase "no taxation without representation" began to echo in taverns, churches, and town squares. For ordinary families, the effects were immediate. Paper now carried an extra cost, affecting wills, newspapers, even playing cards. Tea, a cherished comfort even in modest homes, became a symbol of oppression. Merchants grumbled as their goods were taxed heavily, and farmers felt the ripple effect in higher prices. Every purchase, every trade, carried the weight of distant lawmakers' decisions. But discontent did not remain silent. Women, who managed households, found themselves on the front lines of protest. Refusing imported goods, they returned to spinning and weaving, producing cloth at home rather than buying from Britain. Spinning bees, once simple domestic work, became acts of resistance. Each thread woven was not just fabric, it was defiance. Families boycotted British tea, serving herbal brews instead, flavored with mint, sage, or raspberry leaves. What once was ordinary household work now carried political meaning. Taverns and meeting houses became centers of debate. Men gathered over mugs of cider or ale to argue, to plan, to share grievances. Pamphlets, printed in secret, spread new ideas, ideas of liberty, equality, and self-rule. Ministers spoke from pulpits not only of sin and salvation, but of tyranny and justice, religion and politics, survival and protest, all wove together into a growing sense that the colonies were not merely extensions of Britain, they were something else, something new. Imagine a colonial town square in the 1760s. Merchants argue with customs officials over taxes on their goods. Farmers, dusty from their fields, gather to listen. Women whisper about the cost of sugar rising again, about making do with honey instead. Children watch as men nail pamphlets to doors, Words bold and defiant. Liberty is our right. The atmosphere is tense, but also electric. Beneath the weight of daily hardship, hope flickers, a hope that life might one day be free from distant control. Even in homes, the shift is felt. A mother teaching her daughter to spin reminds her, every thread keeps us free. A father pouring cider instead of tea explains to his son why British imports are boycotted. These conversations shape children as much as sermons or school lessons. The next generation grows up with the idea that independence is not only possible, but necessary. Not everyone agrees. Some colonists remain loyal to Britain, believing rebellion is foolish, dangerous, or even sinful. To them, the king is rightful, and taxes are the cost of protection and trade. Families argue at dinner tables, neighbors disagree in fields, divisions begin to appear in once united communities. The stirrings of revolution are not only against Britain, but also within the colonies themselves. Still, momentum builds. The act of boycotting unites communities across class lines. Poor farmers and wealthy merchants, blacksmiths and lawyers, men and women all find themselves part of the same resistance, each contributing in their own way. A child refusing imported sweets, a craftsman refusing to buy British tools, a household refusing British cloth. All these small acts add up to a larger movement. The sense of identity begins to shift. Colonists stop seeing themselves only as English subjects living abroad. They start to think of themselves as Americans, bound together not just by hardship, but by a shared dream of self-rule. The daily resilience they have honed through tending fires, preserving food, enduring illness, now finds a new outlet. That same strength begins to fuel political courage. Consider the irony. The very hardships of colonial life had trained people to be self-reliant, to depend on neighbors, to endure uncertainty. Now those same qualities made them capable of imagining independence. When Britain tried to tighten control, colonists resisted with the tools they knew best: hard work, resourcefulness, and unity. This period is filled with small but powerful acts. A woman in Boston hosts a spinning circle, her friends chatting as their wheels hum, producing yards of cloth. A farmer in Virginia refuses to sell grain to merchants who trade only in British goods. A printer in Philadelphia stays up late setting type for a pamphlet urging resistance. Each person plays a part, whether they realize it or not. The revolution does not begin with muskets. It begins with decisions in kitchens, workshops, and town halls. The seeds are planted in soil already rich with resilience. People who have endured freezing winters, poor harvests, and constant illness are not easily intimidated. They know suffering, but they also know perseverance. And so, when Britain presses harder, they bend but do not break. The joy of music, quilts, stories, and games continues, but beneath it, a new beat begins to pulse. It is the sound of change, the stirring of independence, the birth of a new identity. What began as hardship now becomes the foundation for courage. Families who once prayed only for survival now pray for freedom. Communities that once gathered only for work now gather for protest. And a people who once called themselves subjects begin to dream of becoming citizens. The revolution has not yet come, but the air is thick with its possibility. Every boycott, every sermon, every spinning wheel hums with the sound of tomorrow. And as the colonies look toward that uncertain future, they carry with them not just the memory of hardship, but the unshakable conviction that they can endure, they can resist, and they can one day be free. The embers in the hearth burn low, casting soft shadows on the rough walls of the cabin. Another day in colonial America has ended, and with it another cycle of labor, survival, and resilience. The family lies down on straw beds, sore but alive. Outside, the wind rattles shutters, and the night settles heavy over the settlement. Yet, in the quiet of these ordinary moments, lies something extraordinary, the birth of values that would shape not only these families, but an entire nation. The legacy of colonial life is not written only in laws, wars, or declarations. It is written in the hands of women who spun thread by firelight, in the backs of men who bent over plows, in the laughter of children who played with wooden hoops after chores. It is written in every blister, every prayer, every quilt, every loaf of bread pulled from a shared oven. From these daily struggles came the qualities that would define a new people: resilience, self-reliance, and a deep sense of community. Resilience was forged in hardship. Families faced winters where frost crept into homes, harvests where crops failed, summers when disease swept through villages. And yet, they endured. They learned to adapt, to preserve food in new ways, to treat sickness with whatever remedies they could find, to rebuild barns and homes destroyed by fire or storm. Each challenge made them stronger. Each setback taught them patience. This resilience was not abstract. It was lived, tested, and proven again and again. It became part of their character, a quiet strength carried forward into every generation. Self-reliance grew out of necessity. In a world without supermarkets, hospitals, or factories, everything had to be made or repaired by hand. Families learned to sew clothes, to mend tools, to build furniture, to produce nearly everything they needed. A farmer could not wait for help when a fence broke. He fixed it himself. A mother could not buy new garments when a dress tore. She patched it carefully, making it last another season. Children grew up knowing that their survival depended not on convenience, but on skill. This independence did not mean isolation, but it did mean confidence. A family that could survive winter on its own strength knew it was capable of enduring almost anything. Yet self-reliance was always balanced by community. No household could stand alone forever. Neighbors lent tools, shared food, helped raise barns, and nursed each other through sickness. When a family's fire went out, another offered coals. When a child was orphaned, others stepped in to care for them. Community was not charity, it was survival. People knew that one day they would need the same help in return. These bonds of mutual responsibility created trust and unity. It was in these acts of cooperation that colonists found both comfort and strength. Together, resilience, self-reliance, and community formed the foundation of something larger, a belief that ordinary people could solve extraordinary problems. They had already solved countless smaller ones: how to keep warm, how to stay fed, how to endure illness, how to survive winters. So when the challenges of revolution and nation-building arose, they carried with them the conviction that they could face them too. The habits of endurance and cooperation, learned in kitchens and fields, became the habits of democracy and independence. Consider the mother who spends her evenings spinning thread. She may not know it, but her patience teaches her children that persistence creates strength. Consider the father who teaches his son to repair a broken plow. He may not realize it, but he is instilling a lesson that problems can be solved by one's own effort. Consider the neighbor who offers food to a sick family. He may not think of it as political, but he is modeling the principle that communities thrive when they care for one another. These ordinary acts, multiplied across thousands of families and years, became extraordinary when woven together. The colonial legacy also shaped attitudes toward freedom. People who endured so much hardship developed a fierce sense of dignity. They wanted to make their own choices, to govern their own lives, to live by rules they helped create. Their faith, their work, their joy, their protests, all were infused with the conviction that life's meaning was found in both independence and interdependence. This balance of self-reliance and community would one day become central to the American identity. In our world today, it is easy to forget how much was built on these quiet foundations. We live surrounded by comforts unknown to colonial families, yet their lessons still matter. Resilience teaches us not to crumble at the first sign of hardship. Self-reliance reminds us of the dignity of skill, of solving problems with our own hands. Community shows us that no matter how independent we are strongest when we stand together. Imagine again that family at the end of the day. The father stretches his aching back. The mother folds a finished quilt. The children drift to sleep beside the fire. They do not know they are creating a legacy. They only know they must rise again tomorrow to face another round of work and uncertainty. But centuries later, we look back and see in their lives the roots of values that endure, strength in adversity, pride in labor, and hope in unity. The legacy of colonial America is not only hardship, it is also the quiet dignity of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, building lives from nothing, shaping communities out of wilderness, and carrying forward the belief that survival, freedom, and resilience belong to everyone willing to work for them. From straw beds and smoky hearths grew a nation, and from the struggles of everyday people grew the ideals that still guide us. And so, as the fire dies down, and another colonial night gives way to silence, the true inheritance of this world remains not in the wealth of the few, not in the records of rulers, but in the lives of ordinary families who endured, adapted, and hoped. Their resilience, their self-reliance, and their community spirit are not relics of the past. They are lessons we can still carry into the future. As we close our journey through colonial America, take a moment to breathe and reflect. What began as a simple glimpse into a distant past has unfolded into something much more, a portrait of resilience, hardship, joy, and transformation. We have walked through smoky cabins at dawn, bent our backs in fields, carried heavy buckets of water, and sat at firelit tables where every meal was the result of unending labor. We have seen how survival required grit, how disease haunted families, and how faith offered meaning when answers could not be found. And yet, amid the hardship, there was light. Families quilted blankets not only for warmth, but for beauty. Children spun wooden hoops and laughed despite weary hands. Communities came together to raise barns, husk corn, and share cider by firelight. Women spun thread not only for clothing, but as quiet acts of resistance, weaving both fabric and freedom. In these small, ordinary acts lay the seeds of something extraordinary, the spirit that would one day grow into a nation. The lessons of colonial America stretch beyond history. They remind us that joy can be found in simplicity, that resilience is forged in struggle, and that no one thrives alone. They teach us the dignity of work, the value of community, and the power of hope. They show us that while comfort makes life easier, it is hardship that shapes character, and they whisper that freedom, once imagined by ordinary people, can change the course of history. Perhaps the most powerful lesson is this: greatness is not always born in grand halls or through dramatic speeches. Often, it is born in kitchens where bread is kneaded, in fields where hands blister, in stories told by firelight, and in prayers whispered over sickbeds. Ordinary people, through their endurance, creativity, and courage, created a legacy far larger than themselves. As you return from this journey, look around your own life. The conveniences we take for granted, clean water, safe food, light at the flick of a switch, exist because generations before us endured without them. The freedoms we hold are built on the values of self-reliance, resilience, and community that grew out of those smoky cabins and crowded towns. Their story is not just history, it is part of us. So tonight, as you let your eyes grow heavy and your mind drift into rest, carry with you a little of their strength. Remember that even in the hardest times, human beings find ways to laugh, to create, to endure, and to dream. That was true in the 1700s, and it remains true today. Thank you for joining me on this journey back through time. If you enjoyed this exploration, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more stories that uncover the hidden sides of history. I would also love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how these stories connect us across places and time zones. Until next time, may you carry with you the quiet strength of those who came before us, the joy of simple moments, and the reminder that history is never just the past. It is the story that continues to shape who we are. Good night, and I will see you in the next story.